The 200-year-old Scheidwin Haveli stood on the edge of the forgotten outskirts like a dying beast, its walls darkened by centuries of storms, and its windows blackened as if they once held burning souls behind them. Stories whispered that every time a group entered one, life was always taken, and those who returned were never the same but 7 friends. Ethan Clark, Liam Walker, Sophie Reed, Aidan Brooks, Maya Hill, Jordan Price, and Chloe Morgan were too curious, too thrilled by danger, and too naive to believe in ancient warnings. So, on a cold wind-night, they made their way through the broken iron gate that screeched like a warning cry as it opened. The Haveli loomed above them like a living creature, its wooden balconies bent like rib bones, and its cracked walls crawling with vines that resembled veins, pulsing faintly under the moonlight. Chloe, the quietest among them, already felt dread whispering inside her chest. But the others teased her, insisting it was just an old building, nothing more, and together they stepped inside, where the air felt unnaturally heavy, as if each breath carried centuries of trapped souls. The massive entrance hall was lined with tall portraits, but every face in the paintings had been violently scratched out, leaving gouges where eyes should have been, and as soon as the group crossed the threshold, the main door behind them slammed shut so violently that dust showered from the ceiling. Liam laughed nervously and tried to pull it open again, but it would not budge, almost as if the Haveli had swallowed them whole. The temperature dropped sharply, their breaths visible in the air, although it was the middle of summer, and the floorboards creaked under their feet like whispering voices. Chloe kept close to Sophie, who held her trembling hand, and whispered that they should stay calm. But their group's excitement began to fade as the Haveli settled into its ominous silence, watching them. Ethan, pretending to be brave, wandered ahead into a long corridor, shining his phone light along the peeling walls. He joked about finding treasure or ghosts, but then he froze, his face draining of color. He swore he saw a shadow kneeling in the middle of the hallway, but when the others reached him, there was nothing there. They moved deeper, passing rooms filled with rotted furniture, mirrors covered in dust, and broken toys scattered across the floor, the remnants of lives that had vanished long ago. Every step echoed in chilling rhythm, and the Haveli seemed to breathe around them, its old wooden structure shifting as if adjusting to their presence. Eventually, they found themselves in what appeared to be the main living chamber, where an oversized mirror, tall, cracked, framed in rusted gold, stood against the wall. Maya, drawn to it strangely, stepped closer while the others watched. Her reflection seemed normal at first, but then it tilted its head unnaturally, though. Maya herself did not move, and before she could react, her reflection smiled with a wide, broken grin and reached out toward her. The real Maya screamed as invisible fingers wrapped around her neck, lifting her into the air. The group panicked, trying to pull her away, but their hands passed through nothing, and her legs kicked helplessly as she clawed at her throat. The mirror showed her reflection being strangled by a dark figure standing behind her, though in reality the space behind her was empty. Maya's eyes bulged, her mouth opening in a silent cry, until her neck snapped with a sickening crack, and her body dropped lifelessly to the floor, but the mirror still showed her standing, smiling with that twisted grin. Terrified, the friends dragged her body away, but the second they blinked, it vanished completely, leaving only her scarf lying on the dusty floor. Their panic skyrocketed. Chloe begged them to leave, but the door behind them had disappeared, replaced by a solid wall of old stone. The Haveli had rearranged itself. They ran blindly through the dark corridors, trying to find any exit, but the hallways twisted and turned in impossible ways. Sometimes the same portrait appeared over and over, even though they changed directions. A cold laughter echoed faintly, like a child giggling far away. In a narrow passage, Aidan suddenly felt a tug on his backpack. He turned around sharply but saw no one, only Chloe looking terrified beside him. They kept moving faster, but Aidan kept glancing behind him, feeling watched. They reached a small prayer room, candles still burning despite no one being here in decades. As they passed the doorway, Aidan's foot crunched on something. It was a pile of shattered bones. The door slammed shut behind him, separating him from the group, and the candles flared bright blue as Aidan screamed for help. The others tried to pry the door open, but Aidan's screams turned into choking sounds, then into frantic whimpers. Inside, unseen shadows crawled along the ceiling like black liquid. Aidan stumbled backward, tripping over bones, and something grabbed his ankle, dragging him across the floor. His nails scraped the wood, leaving marks as he screamed Chloe's name. The dark figure rose behind him, a towering shape with no face, only a wide, gaping mouth filled with jagged bone-like teeth, and it lifted him effortlessly. Aiden's spine bent unnaturally as his body twisted in ways that bones shouldn't allow, and with one vicious motion, the creature tore him apart. When the door finally creaked open again, the room was empty except for a smear of blood in the shape of a hand. The remaining 5, Chloe, Ethan, Liam, Sophie, and Jordan, were shaking, their sanity fraying. Even Ethan, usually brave, was trembling violently. They hurried down another corridor, but then a faint sobbing sound reached Sophie's ears. She knew it wasn't Maya, or Adana. It sounded older, sadder, coming from behind a partially opened door. Against everyone's warnings, she stepped in. The moment she crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her, and she was inside a child's bedroom, tiny bed, broken dollhouse, and a music box still playing a slow, haunting tune. Sophie called out to her friends, but her voice didn't reach them. The air grew colder. The doll on the floor moved its head toward her with a crack. Its eyes glowed faint yellow, and then the child-sized shadow sitting on the bed lifted its chin slowly, revealing a mouth sewn shut with thread. Sophie screamed and ran for the door, but the shadow stood in front of it instantly as if teleporting. The thread on its mouth ripped open one by one, bleeding black ooze, and it whispered her name in a distorted echo. The dollhouse doors opened on their own, and dozens of tiny porcelain hands crawled out like spiders, grabbing Sophie's legs, arms, and hair. She struggled, sobbing in terror, but the hands dragged her into the dollhouse, shrinking her body unnaturally as she cried for Ethan. Her voice grew smaller, fainter, until the dollhouse doors slammed shut and her screams ceased. When the boys opened the door seconds later, the room was empty except for a tiny porcelain doll sitting on the bed with Sophie's exact face. Jordan vomited from fear. It ran again, now only 4 left. Ethan, Liam, Jordan, and Chloe. The Haveli groaned and the chandelier above them swung violently. They reached a staircase, its steps coated with dust so thick it muffled their footsteps. As they ascended, the railings turned warmer, almost like flesh. Halfway up, Liam felt something drip on his shoulder. He touched it, blood. He looked up and saw a figure hanging upside down from the ceiling, its hair covering its face. The figure twitched, crawling toward him along the ceiling like a spider. Liam screamed and sprinted up the stairs, but the figure dropped onto him, pinning him to the floor. It had no face, just a hollow void where features should be. The void opened like a mouth and began sucking the air from Liam's lungs. His chest caved inward as he choked, his ribs cracking audibly while Ethan and Jordan tried to pull the creature off him. Liam's eyes rolled back, his body turning blue until finally he collapsed, lifeless. The creature evaporated into black smoke. Ethan broke down, punching the wall in despair. Chloe sobbed. Jordan whispered prayers. They were the last 3. The Haveli wasn't done. They stumbled into the courtyard, thinking they'd reached an escape route, but instead found a massive well in the center. The air smelled like death. Jordan leaned slightly over the edge to peer inside. A hand shot up with lightning speed, grabbing his hair. He screamed as he was yanked into the well. Chloe and Ethan grabbed his arms, trying to pull him back up, but the force below was too strong. Jordan's body slammed against the stone walls as he was dragged down deeper and deeper. His screams grew wet and gargled, then silence. Ethan was hysterical. Chloe knew they needed to move before the Haveli chose its next victim. They ran toward the 2nd floor, thinking they might find a window to escape. Ethan kept glancing behind him, hearing footsteps that didn't belong to either of them. At the top, they entered a long hallway lined with mirrors. Chloe begged Ethan not to look, but curiosity got him. In the reflection, he saw a version of himself smiling wide, forced, unnatural. Then the reflection grabbed the sides of the mirror and climbed out. Ethan froze in terror as his mirror double lunged at him, pinning him down, and began ripping pieces of flesh from his body. Ethan screamed Chloe's name until his voice broke. His reflection dragged him into the mirror and the glass sealed shut, leaving the hallway empty except for Chloe. Alone, trembling, her legs barely holding her, Chloe ran. The Haveli twisted around her, changing its layout, but she followed the faint moonlight leaking through a cracked balcony door. Behind her, She heard the sound of all her friends' voices calling her name in distorted tones, begging her to stay with them forever. She didn't look back. She reached the balcony. The door slammed behind her. The faceless shadow appeared again, towering, stretching its arms toward her. Without thinking, Chloe climbed onto the railing and jumped. The second floor wasn't too high, but the landing was brutal. She hit the ground hard, ankles shattering, but she crawled away, sobbing in pain. Behind her, the Haveli let out a long, angry groan, as if disappointed its final victim escaped. Chloe limped through the gate, collapsing onto the dirt road. When she looked back, the Haveli's lights flickered once, then went dark. She was the only one who survived. And as she crawled toward safety, she heard the wind carry a whisper from the Haveli's broken windows. One life, every visit. See you next time.